So, the political philosophy of St. Augustine. Who was St. Augustine? St. Augustine is the Bishop of Hippo. Well, he did not start his life as a Christian. Uh, for many years, before he was 30 years old, he went through a lot of what we call this different intellectual leanings or inclinations. He was once a part of Manichaeanism, but what was crucial to his conversion was actually his engagement with Neoplatonism. Because of Neoplatonism, St. Augustine was able to conceptualize or even imagine the possibility of an incorporeal God, which is basically contrary to the many philosophies that were prevalent during his time, which were actually materialistic. And so, because of Neoplatonism, St. Augustine was able to grapple with the idea of an incorporeal God, or God which is not, or who is not material. St. Augustine considered the City of God as his magnum opus. And well, the context of this book, which actually he 13 to 14 years, basically he devoted his life to writing the 22 books of the City of God. The first part of the City of God was devoted to the defense of the Christians against the accusations of the pagans. During the time of Saint Augustine, there's this rift between the pagans and the Christians, and when Rome was ransacked by uh, the Visigoths and then later on the Vandals, no, uh, the Romans actually blamed the Christians because it was due to the weakness of, the Christian piety, the Christian virtues, which actually allowed the Romans to be weakened and therefore became susceptible to the attacks of the barbarians. But Saint Augustine mentioned that that is actually not the case. If only did Rome embrace completely Christianity, then Rome would have been saved. As a matter of fact, these virtues have already been practiced by Rome even before the advent of Christianity. And the first part of the book was devoted to that, and I'm not really going to the details of that. What I'm really going to dig into, well, uh, in more details, is actually the political side of Saint Augustine's City of God. Now, in the City of God, Saint Augustine declared that a state is called a state because there is justice in it. If you take away justice within the state, then that is no longer a state. That's a great robbery, Saint Augustine would say. And so from the very start, Saint Augustine is very, very clear on the idea that a state is a state because there is justice in it. You take away the justice and it's no longer a state. It becomes a great robbery. Um, Come to think of it, governments, Max Weber will basically say that uh, state has the, monopoly of the use of violence. Um, Basically, the state can curtail your liberty, can take away your private property, can tax you, and so on and so forth. So, if all these things are not done for the common good, or if all these things are devoid of what is just, then all these things are just robberies. That's actually the point of St. Augustine, and I think that's a very good point. For St. Augustine, a ruler, the true happiness of a ruler basically lies in a just rule. Um, a ruler is a good ruler and is a happy ruler if he or she rules with justice. So, justice basically as a virtue plays an integral role in St. Augustine's perspective of what politics is, or what state is all about. But more importantly, St. Augustine basically, for St. Augustine, there are no citizens. He's not really particular with races, with nations, with different kingdoms. He's not really particular with those things. He's only particular with two kinds of citizenship: the citizenship in the heavenly city and the citizenship in the earthly city. And basically, this citizenship is a product of two kinds of loves. The citizenship in the earthly city is a product of love of the self, even to the contempt of God. And the heavenly city, the Civitate Dei, or the city of God, is basically a product of the citizens' love for God, even to the contempt of the self. Again, let me highlight the point that St. Augustine does not imply that love of God is an antithesis to the love of man and love of self, and vice versa. No, he's not actually implying that. What he's implying is that, as a matter of fact, they are not contrary to each other. Only that when the love of self becomes too much, even to the point of hating God, now that's something. Okay. Now, love of God even to the contempt of the self implies that, instances are, we can see in a lot of instances that in order to really pursue love of God, we have to deny ourselves. We have to deny ourselves pleasures, things that we want the most, in order to follow the mandate of what God is actually asking of us. So that's the kind of way of thinking that St. Augustine is highlighting in the city of God, and the dichotomy between the earthly and the heavenly city. And the earthly and the heavenly city actually came from the two types of man. And historically speaking, St. Augustine basically traced this from Cain and Abel. So Cain is basically the ancestor of these people, or the citizens of the earthly city, while Abel is the ancestors of the citizens of the heavenly city. And for St. Augustine, the earthly city was basically built by the murder of Abel, and Saint Augustine related that to the founding of the Roman Empire. Remember the legend of Romulus and Remus, these two brothers. Both of them basically wanted to build the city of Rome, but it's just Romulus cannot accept the fact that he would be sharing the glory of building this magnificent city with his brother, and so he killed his brother. And so from the very starting point of the earthly city, and even it can be seen in the Roman Empire, St. Augustine is actually saying that there's something problematic in it. And so St. Augustine highlights the idea that from the very foundation of the earthly city, there's a deep conflict in it, which is not easily resolvable. St. Augustine sees it as the lust for power. St. Augustine sees the earthly city is actually divided against itself. The earthly city is composed of different warring tribes, different warring kingdoms against each other, killing each other, engaged in constant war with each other. Yes, there are peace, but peace are relatively not lasting, as a matter of fact. And it has always been like that, according to St. Augustine. And St. Augustine traces that to his notion of the libido dominandi, or the desire to dominate. Because in the earthly city, the politics in the earthly city, the political hierarchy, and even the social order and peace in the earthly city is actually outlined by the lust for domination. Because every one of us is basically exhibiting this kind of libido dominandi, the desire to dominate, or the lust for power, the lust to dominate. And this is basically the reason why the earthly city is divided against itself. Contrasting with the heavenly city for St. Augustine, the heavenly city is basically governed by love. So it's not really so much as about appropriating the things of the earth for your own consumption, but love is about giving away the things that you have to other people. So that's the difference. That's why peace in the earthly city will never last. Peace in the heavenly city is everlasting. Um, Saint Augustine basically is a political thinker who believed that there is this great importance of the social life. I mean, somehow Saint Augustine is saying that living in a society is typical of a human being, and yet living in a society for Saint Augustine is basically beleaguered with a lot of problems. There are always conflicts, betrayals, evils, war, murder, violence, and all these things. And he also highlights the shortcomings of human justice. St. Augustine believed that justice can never be achieved in this world. It can never be achieved in this world. Justice can completely be achieved in the heavenly city or in the eternal reign of God. Because you can see in human justice there's this inherent contradictions. His example was you have a judge, and yet the judge who is supposed to administer justice is not really capable of administering justice. A judge is not capable of assessing the entirety of the situation. The judge cannot even read the mind of the person sitting in the witness stand. And so how can he basically administer justice? And not only that, St. Augustine added that in the earthly city, there's always this misery and war. There's always this misery and war. And there's this great difficulty in unity because of this plurality of cultures and language. So St. Augustine will say it's even, more difficult for a man with different nationalities to talk to each other than, dogs to relate to each other, St. Augustine will say. And, in a way, this always creates tensions. It always creates the conflicts that later on ensues into war. But nevertheless, St. Augustine believed that the objective of war is peace. But in a way, that's kinda ironic because the end is good. For St. Augustine, peace is good because peace basically characterizes social order. And without social order, basically we cannot do anything. There is no good without social order. And, peace is social order. But in order to achieve peace, there has to be war. But the thing is, when a war ends, the winning party becomes the sovereign ruler. And that sovereign ruler imposes its authority on the rest of the losing party. And then later on, time will come that the losing party will basically try to challenge the status quo. And once again, war will basically ensue. Right? And so, St. Augustine is basically kind of describing the world, the human world, the social world. Yes, the social world is basically where we are in. And yet, there are a lot of problems in the social world. And these problems seem to be unresolvable. They cannot be resolved. Well, of course, St. Augustine will basically trace all these problems to the notion of original sin. That there's this deeply embedded sin within all of us, even in human societies, in human culture. And this is basically the reason why we are in such a mess. So in a way, St. Augustine is pessimistic when it comes to looking into the problems of the world, saying that there's really no human way to solve all these problems. And so the people of the earthly city sees themselves not as citizens of the earthly city, but as a matter of fact, they are here in the earthly city, but they do not see themselves as citizens of the earthly city. As a matter of fact, they only see themselves as pilgrims. The citizens of the heavenly city simply sojourn in the earthly city. St. Augustine believed that all men are supposed to be equal. There is this sublime dignity inherent in all of us. St. Augustine will agree to that. And so, he basically does not agree with slavery. For St. Augustine, man should not have dominion over other men. And slavery is a product of sin and not of human nature. But worse than slavery, St. Augustine will say, is basically slavery from sin. Yes, slavery is bad. Slavery is bad, it's unjust, it's against nature, it's basically against the will of God. But it's even worse to be a slave of sin. Just basically the lust for ruling, the libido dominandi, which I was talking about a while ago. St. Augustine will basically make use of the notion of libido dominandi as a kind of root to all evil that is happening. And by nature, no one is supposed to be a slave. No one is supposed to be a slave. No one is supposed to be a slave of sin. And yet we are here, living in this kind of predicament. St. Augustine believed in the central idea of grace, the saving nature of grace. For St. Augustine, reason is important, but reason cannot save us. Reason cannot actually know the truth. For St. Augustine, in order for reason to understand the truth, there must be the intervention of grace. So without grace, reason is nothing, St. Augustine will say. And then, towards the last part of the City of God, St. Augustine will highlight the supranational character of the heavenly city. And you can find this in book 19, chapter 17. It is also in this chapter where St. Augustine kind of characterized his idea of what politics is. Let me read this to you from the City of God. Thus, the things necessary for this mortal life are used by both kinds of men and families alike. But each has its own peculiar and widely different aim in using it. So in a way, St. Augustine is saying that both citizens of the heavenly and the earthly city are basically in the earthly city. And they are basically aiming for the goods of the world, the goods that can be found in the earthly city. But the difference lies in their perspective of it. The people of the earthly city will basically aim for the glory found in the earthly city, while the citizens of the heavenly city will not aim for such glories, but basically aim for the glory of God. Let me continue. The earthly city, which does not live by faith, seeks an earthly peace. And the end it proposes in the well-ordered concord of civic obedience and rule is the combination of men's wills to attain the things which are helpful to this life. So basically what St. Augustine is saying is that the goal of politics is the combination of men's wills to attain the things which are helpful to this life. So in a way, St. Augustine is already alluding to the social contract. That politics in the earthly city is basically like a social contract. It's a well-ordered concord among men. It's an agreement among men so that they follow certain set of rules and orders for the attainment of the goods of the world. Then he continued, the heavenly city, or rather the part of it which sojourns on earth and lives by faith, because for St. Augustine, the heavenly city is not just simply composed of people, but they're also composed of angelic beings, makes use of this peace only because it must. Because they are sojourning in the earthly city, so they must basically use this kind of peace, this kind of politics, this kind of political and social order, until this mortal condition which necessitates it shall pass away. Meaning to say, the people of the heavenly city will basically make use of these politics in the earthly city, but not for the glory of the things of the earth, but for the glory of God. Until the time will come that everything will be changed. The kingdom of God will basically at hand. And then to highlight the supranational character of the heavenly city, um, St. Augustine will say, "This heavenly city, then, while it sojourns on earth, calls citizens out of all nations, and gathers together a society of pilgrims of all languages, not scrupling about diversities in the manners, laws, and institutions whereby earthly peace is secured and maintained, but recognizing that, however various these are, they all tend to one and the same end of earthly peace." So, in a way, St. Augustine is saying that for the people or the citizens of the heavenly city, well, yes, they do engage in politics, but only for the time being, because the mortal body necessitates it. And not only that, the heavenly city is basically a city, a society that transcends the boundaries of culture, of religions and traditions and customs and laws and the diversities of languages. It does not really matter. What matters is the aim of the heavenly city. Remember that the heavenly city is basically a product of the love of God, even to the contempt of the self. And then let me end with this. In its pilgrim state, the heavenly city possesses this peace by faith. And by this faith, it lives righteously when it refers to the attainment of that peace, every good action towards God and man. For the life of the city is a social life. So, St. Augustine, although he did not say that, uh, man living in a society is something natural, but he says that it is something typical for existence within the earthly city. And there's nothing wrong with that. It becomes wrong if society is being used not for the sake of the attainment of the glory of God, but for the glory of the self, but for the glory of the worldly things. And basically, this separates the citizens of the earthly city and the citizens of the heavenly city.